We cannot let them come into this country, period.
It's a sentiment spreading like wildfire now in both parties. No Syrian refugees in the U.S.
We can't have another problem, and this could be one of the great Trojan horses.
Governors across the country are now taking matters into their own hands, closing their state borders, from Alabama to Arkansas to Indiana, Michigan, and more.
As we continue to learn more about the Paris attackers, at least one of the bombers' connections to Europe's refugee crisis is causing widespread fear. Officials say at least one of the suicide bombers, identified as 25-year-old Ahmed al-Mohammed, crossed into France with a flood of Syrian refugees. About 9 million Syrian refugees have fled their homes since 2011, with many of them resettling in other parts of Syria or neighboring countries. Their movements and background are tough to trace, as many don't have any documentation. Although France isn't one of the largest homes for Syrian refugees, the country's still been receiving a massive influx in its population, and fears over letting the flow of refugees continue is spreading from Europe to the United States. While on the national level there appears to be no changes to President Obama's plan to bring in 10,000 Syrian refugees,
the Obama administration says those refugees must still be vetted and welcomed.
We cannot close our doors to these people.
At least two U.S. politicians, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder and Alabama Governor Robert Bentley, have publicly announced their states will no longer welcome Syrian refugees. Snyder said in a statement, "Michigan is a welcoming state, and we are proud of our rich history of immigration, but our first priority is protecting the safety of our residents."
I am now requesting that the President and the federal government cease sending refugees from Syria to North Carolina.
So Governor, Alabama and Michigan, along now with Texas, all saying, we just can't risk this. They don't trust the vetting of these refugees, and apparently the citizenry of these states indicate they don't want this either. Tell us about your decision and how you came to it.
Well, our decision is much more extensive, and we explain in far more detail what is going on, and that is because of the very real challenges that Texas has had with regard to ISIS, as well as with regard to Syrians coming across our southern border. First of all, with regard to what has happened in Texas with ISIS. ISIS claimed credit last May when two terrorist gunmen launched an attack in Garland, Texas. You saw this on TV. And then less than 2 weeks later, the FBI arrested an Iraqi-born man in North Texas and charged him with lying to federal agents about traveling to Syria to fight with ISIS. And then back when I was Attorney General last year, we participated in a joint terrorism task force that arrested two residents in Austin, the state's capital, for providing material support to terrorists, including ISIS. And then on top of that, I can't even count the number. I actually asked for a count, and it's in the hundreds of the number of Syrians who have crossed our southern border, who have been apprehended. And mind you, those are the ones who are apprehended. And mind you also, Laura, a Syrian coming across our southern border is not someone coming over here to work in the agricultural fields. We don't know who these people are or what they're doing, but we do know they are coming from a nation or a state that is connected with terrorism, posing very real danger to the people in this state and in this country. Remember this, and that is we know that at least one of the people, maybe more than one of the people who were involved in Paris attacks were Syrian refugees. It is reprehensible for the United States of America to allow any Syrian refugee across our border, knowing full well that we can keep them out, that we must keep them out, if we are to keep our fellow Americans safe.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced his state will not accept refugees from Syria, precisely as President Obama was speaking on the matter in Turkey.
When I hear political leaders suggesting that there would be a religious test for which person who's fleeing from a war-torn country is admitted, when some of those folks themselves come from families who benefited from protection when they were fleeing political persecution, that's shameful.
That a thinly veiled hit on presidential candidate Ted Cruz.
I have to say, particularly in light of what happened in Paris, that's nothing short of lunacy.
Cruz, whose father fled to the U.S. from Cuba, told us today he will introduce legislation this week banning Syrian Muslim refugees from America.
What would have happened if your father was trying to get from Cuba to the United States and the political leaders here said, nope, we don't think so, because who knows, maybe you could be somebody who could, commit crimes against Americans.
Well, see, that's why it's important to define what it is we're fighting. If my father were part of a theocratic and political movement like radical Islamism that promotes murdering anyone who doesn't share your extreme faith or forcibly converting them, then it would make perfect sense. One of the people who carried out this terrorist attack in Paris was a Syrian refugee who came in, and the president apparently is perfectly fine with bringing people into this country to carry out similar acts of terrorism.
Ben Carson wrote House Speaker Paul Ryan calling on Congress to stop paying for programs to resettle refugees.
Congress, I think, should defund all the programs that allow these people to be brought here immediately, today.
Ohio Governor John Kasich, who initially supported bringing Syrian refugees to the U.S., changed his mind, citing security concerns.
Look, there is no way that we can put any of our people at risk by bringing people in at this point.